Freshwater. We're leaving the marine biome and we're going to freshwater. Reminders. What percent of Earth is freshwater? What? 3%. 97% marine, 3% fresh. What percent of the fresh water is easily accessible? Less than 1. And I want you to think about that because our next unit, after we finish biomes, is really all about freshwater usage. And we're talking about that less than 1%, maybe 30-ish, because we do use some fresh water that's not easily accessible, okay? These are the two main types of fresh water. What are they? What'd you say, Jack? Running and still. So latic means flowing water, and lentic, and if you know Spanish, lentic sounds like lento, which is slow. There might be a little bit of movement, but it's considered standing water. Latic examples. It doesn't mean it's all of them, but examples of flowing water can be rivers, falls, and then this is an important one because this is one we do tap into that's not easily accessible, which is aquifers. Good. Very important that you remember that aquifers move. They're like underground rivers. Where do they end up? In the ocean, or I taught you aquifers end up in large bodies of water. So we're going to end up in an ocean or a lake. Good. So we do end up in fresh water as well. It is a freshwater flowing system. Lentic examples can be ponds and lakes. So we're going to talk about lakes because lakes, and I want you to add that to your notes. Lakes are where what we rely on. That easily accessible fresh water, like ponds, rivers, we rely on lakes. Lakes have zones. What did we learn has zones? The ocean. So when you think about the ocean zones, think about the lake zones and try to make sense of the words we learned because they're the same with a little variation, okay? So lake zones, you have littoral and you have limnetic. What do you think the littoral compares to? Which marine zone? Coastal. Good job. Because we're near the shore, right? Sunlight will penetrate or not penetrate the entire zone. What do you think? Will. It's euphotic. Sunlight penetrates the entire zone. What kind of organisms do you see in this picture? Characteristics. Let's talk characteristics. What about the plants? What do you see is we're going to have a lot of photosynthesis because sunlight penetrates the entire zone. What do plants look like in this biome, in this area of the lake? Good. They're rooted. Let's do that. They're rooted plants, okay? And then he says the leaves are above the water. What else do you see? Look at this. What happens to lakes that happens to the coastal zone? What can happen to a lake? That's the same thing that happened to a coastal zone. It doesn't move. So I'm going to remind you, a coastal zone has tides. So they have periods of high tide and period of low tide. What can happen to a lake? Water can evaporate or not flow into the lake to fill it up as fast. So organisms are going to be able to live on land and on water. That's really what the key is, just like in the coastal zone. We've got rooted plants, but wherever there's excess light and there's going to be plants, what are the plants going to do? And where there's photosynthesis, you have what? High what? Yes. Wherever there's plants, that means what? What do you see here? Yes. I've asked you that question, I think 4 times. Wherever we have light, wherever there's primary productivity, you're going to have high biodiversity. We're high primary productivity. Why is there biodiversity in the abyss? Here's a test question. If there's no light, there's still high primary productivity because bacteria uses hydrothermal vents to make their own food. Wherever producers are, high biodiversity, okay? All right, so now we're swimming out to the lake. Anybody swim in a lake? I'm going to bring a drop of water for you so you can see what's in there. And we swam out to the lake, deep lake, and it's called the limnetic zone. By the way, highlight the word lit for littoral. Lit for what? Light. Lit for little depth. Try to think about it that way. So when you see the word limnetic, you know it's the other one. It's the deep part. And where there's depth, there's going to be variations of light. We know the top will be we know where there's depth, there's going to be variations of light. What would the top be like? Euphotic. What would the bottom be like? What do we call non-photic? Aphotic. And the middle will be dysphotic, which is twinkling light. If you don't remember the definitions, write them down. Dysphotic, the P was missing. All right, name these zones. We just went over them. See if you can fill out the labels. What? Littoral. And as we swim out, we're going to the limnetic. The top part of the limnetic and the full littoral is euphotic. As you swim down, dysphotic. And as you go deeper, aphotic. And then, what do we call this dotted line here? What zone? What do we call the floor of a body of water? The abyss is the deep ocean, which I'll give you a letter. Yep. By the way, good question. Here, what would you compare the profundo to? The abyss. Keep those things in mind, okay? Benthic.